I've been looking at the president's 120-word FBI budget request, the so-called skinny, I'll call it Ozempic request, that states that, quote, the undoing of the weaponization of the FBI is one of the administration's top priorities. The weaponization of the FBI is something that deeply concerns me. It should concern all of us. And yet, since taking office, President Trump has been on a revenge tour. He has targeted individuals, universities, law firms, with executive orders to cut them out or to make them come under his will. He has used ICE to disappear U.S. citizens without due process, and he's fully ignored a unanimous Supreme Court order, and then over the weekend wasn't sure if he was obligated to uphold the Constitution of the United States. In your book, your recent book, Government Gangsters, you include an appendix with a list of names that people have referred to as an enemies list. Now, I know you will claim it's just an appendix, not an enemies list. So let's focus on how the president sees it, on what the president calls it. And you proudly display his quote on the front cover of your book. The president calls this a brilliant roadmap, a blueprint. And I have not even raised your storied children's book, The Plot Against the King. It concerns me how many people from this blueprint have been targeted with executive orders and FBI investigations. The FBI cannot be weaponized, and under your leadership, it has been nothing but a weapon alongside the president to go after the president's perceived opponents, to stifle dissent and free speech. A few weeks ago, as we saw through a social media post that you quickly deleted, the FBI arrested a judge in Wisconsin for correctly asking ICE officials if they had a judicial warrant instead of an administrative warrant, which they did not have. Despite this judge following the law, on the morning of April the 25th, the FBI arrested the judge in an escalation of the weaponization of the FBI under your leadership. Let me be clear. A functioning democracy does not lock up judges. I am gravely concerned about the utter lack of independence of the FBI and its weaponization under your leadership. I am concerned that the president is using this book, your book, as a blueprint, as he has said. It's a blueprint for revenge. And I am concerned that your eagerness, a childlike giddiness to carry out the president's revenge tour, you've shown yourself to be unserious in your statements before you were sworn in and some after. You've shown yourself unfit to lead this important agency. I was an impeachment manager for President Trump's second impeachment. It was a sad, solemn duty. And so I wanted to ask you about that. Mr. Patel, as you and the president continue to weaponize and investigate his perceived enemies, as you follow this blueprint, when can I, a former impeachment manager, expect the FBI at my door?
Ma'am, you want to know who was targeted by a weaponized FBI? Me. You want to know how and why?
Well,
you want to know what I'm doing to fix it?
That. Let me move on.
Well, you should read the book because there's no enemies
So-
list on that book.
so
There are
you-
people that violated their constitutional obligations and their duties to the American people.
That's good. You
And they
gave
were
them due
rightly
process.
called out.
I'm
And
changing
you should
topics.
give that book to every one of your constituents so they can
changing
read
topics.
about it.
I won't be doing that.
That's their loss.
During your Senate confirmation hearings, you repeatedly denied having any involvement as a private citizen in the firing of FBI officials who engaged in the prosecution against January 6 insurrectionists, the violent rioters who beat and killed Capitol police officers, and whom you referred to as political prisoners. Since then, multiple whistleblowers have come forward, and we know that you likely committed perjury. At the same hearing, you claimed you were not familiar with Stu Peters, an anti-Semitic Holocaust denier, despite the fact that you appeared on Mr. Peters' podcast 8 separate times. 8 times, and you claimed not to recall. Mr. Patel, my second question is, should we worry more about your memory or your veracity?
We should worry more about your lack of candor. You're accusing me of committing
Veracity?
perjury. Tell the American
You
people
didn't
how
know.
I broke the law and committed a felony.
You did.
Have the audacity to actually
No,
put the
all
facts
right, then
forward
the answer is
instead of
both.
lying for political banter so you can have a 20-second
answer
donation hit.
The answer is both. I believe that the
The
men and
answer is
women of the
you're
free
failing,
speech-
not
I
me.
reclaim my time.
Go ahead.
Mr. Patel, I believe that the members of the FBI, and I know many of them, many retired, 38,000 people, as you say, it's a little less than that now, deserve the very best, deserve extraordinary independence, deserve freedom from the fears of being investigated, the freedom of coming forward to make sure they're doing their job. And I'll end with this, that I think it's interesting that in your proposal today, you find yourself at a gulf of difference between you and the president. I wonder how you will resolve that. Will you go to the president and say, we need $11.2 billion, not what you cut out of here? You're asking for more than $1 billion than the president's request. Are you going to go to the president and straighten out that gulf?
I'll do what I've always done and represent the American people, defend this country, and make sure the Constitution is always upheld and the FBI is never weaponized. Maybe you should do the same.
So you agree with the president when he says he doesn't know if he should uphold his constitutional duty?
If you want to just keep putting words in my mouth, the TV cameras are outside.
I thank you. I yield back. Again, this is an unserious moment, sadly, for the FBI. I yield back. I want to start with the role of the Department of Education. I come at this as a mother, as a grandmother, a former teacher myself, a former state legislator with two grandmothers who were public school teachers. I have a lot of experience with the education system in Pennsylvania as well as the country. First, the history of the federal education involvement, and Ms. Watson-Coleman was getting at some of this that I'd like to build upon. Federal investments in education began to increase dramatically in the 50s and 60s and 70s, in tandem with the rise of the success of the civil rights movement. Americans finally began to recognize the vast inequalities in our education system. Thus, federal funding was used to improve education access for students from poor backgrounds or minority students, for women, for people with disabilities, and other marginalized groups. Finally, Congress established the Department of Education in 1979, replacing the Office of Education. Secretary McMahon, it's alarming that you and the president want to turn that clock back. You take us back to a time before any federal oversight of education, before many of the programs that guarantee free and equal access to education for all Americans. You said as much in your testimony. After all the Department of Education's work to ensure equal access to education, you're embarking on the department's final mission? You intend to put yourself out of a job? That's a little jarring to me. If you were a pediatric oncologist, I'd welcome that. Let's get you out of a job through cures, through healing, through ending of pediatric cancer. But ending a department that is supposed to oversee the education of our very youngest, to guide their future? Have you taken the time to educate yourself about this history? I'd encourage you, go ask students who attended school back then. Black students, brown students, students with disabilities, students from poor families. What was access like for them before the Department of Education? Frankly, eliminating the Department of Education, to me, is rather Orwellian. The president and his administration don't want an educated populace. Why don't we just go back to the book 1984 if it hasn't been banned? It's clear to me, this administration wants an uneducated electorate so that Mr. Trump and his courtiers can control thought, therefore control votes, and control the population. I'll note a secondary measure here that is going on. The increase in funding for charter schools. We know that charter schools originally were supposed to be incubators of the best ideas, great practices to be brought back into the public school education system so that every kid had an access to such things. But this administration and you, who want to put yourself out of a job, following the playbook, page 319 of Project 2025, first sentence, shutter the Department of Education. You're all following the book, that book. Too bad that one wasn't banned. And yet, privatizing is really the other ambition, an uneducated electorate and profit and privatization of our education system. Do you promise us that that isn't your ambition?
That clearly is not my ambition. I think I've stated that very well today.
Then why in God's name do you want to shutter it? Why don't you want to protect kids with disabilities? Why don't you want to protect kids who have been every decade denied equal access simply because of how much their parents make, the zip code they live in, the color of their skin. Why are you shuttering a department that's supposed to lift up those children?
Because those programs don't have to flow through the Department of Education, and
They can flow through the state. I was the state legislator. That's called shift and shaft. I've spoken with the governor of Pennsylvania. They can't pick up the tab anymore for education of our students. Not to mention, it would be inequitable by state, by state, by state. Why are you in this job at all? If you don't have a dedication to the future of our children, why are you in this job?
I too am a mother and a grandmother, and I want the best for my family going forward.
Vouchers.
For my grandchildren, for my great-grandchildren, and I hope to leave a legacy that we have established best practices for education that all the states can use. That would be a great legacy to be able to leave, to be able to show states, these are some of the things that they can do. I think states have to look at their budgets.
Madam Secretary, the legacy you will be leaving is that I shut down the Department of Education. How we educate our children determines not just their future, but our own.
But the
I think it's a sad legacy you will leave. I yield back.
The Department of Education is not educating anyone. Well, I can say this, and I will.
I fear the administration lacks a basic understanding of what a trade deficit is. I think many economists take issue with equating a country's trade deficit with any one country and its economic well-being. Some economists actually view a trade deficit as a sign of a country's economic health because it means we're purchasing more. For me, I have a pretty large trade deficit with my local grocer or my hairdresser. It's a good thing. It means I have money enough to get my hair done once in a while and to keep food on the table. It tells nothing about my overall financial position. Do you know when this country actually had a trade surplus, Secretary?
The president likes to speak about before.
No, historically. When did we have a trade surplus? I'm not talking about the president. Historically.
I think early, about 100 years ago.
It was the Great Depression. It was a sign of what was going on. It was during the Great Depression. That's a direction none of us wants to go. Tariffs. It's 90 days. We're going to have 90 deals in 90 days. Then there's a 90-day pause. Many of these tariffs, as they say, punishing. Tariffs on things that make no sense whatsoever. Where are we going to go with the remaining deals? I know of one deal that has been apparently resolved with the United Kingdom. We got 89 more deals to do in just a few more days. Where are we on those deals?
We are in the midst of negotiations with dozens and dozens of countries. We could sign deals, but they're only going to get better as we negotiate them.
That's just simply not
Trade-
true. Because as I told you, the American...
Actually, I promise you it's true because I'm doing it. So I promise you it is true, and I'm here
Thank you.
testifying in front of you, and I promise you it's true.
And Mr. Trump promised to bring down the cost of goods day one. And what he has done through his trade deficit fixation and his tariff chaos has nakedly increased the cost of goods. The estimates are that for consumers in my area, suburban Philadelphia, $2,000 at least a year increases on goods. I'll give you an example of one. Bananas. What's the tariff on bananas? Americans, by the way, love bananas. We buy billions of them a year. I love bananas. What's the tariff on bananas?
The tariff on bananas would be representative of the countries that produce them.
And what's that tariff?
Generally 10%.
Correct, 10%. Walmart has already increased the cost of bananas by 8%.
But as countries do deals with us, that will go to zero. As countries do deals with
But the
us, that will
cost
go
is
to
on the
zero.
American consumer now and on the businesses with the confusion now. Mr. Secretary, I believe you know better. I believe you recognize that a trade deficit is not something to fear. I believe you know that predictability, stability is essential for businesses. I wish you would show that truth to this administration, and I yield back.
Time of the gentlelady is
Do
expired.
you mind, Mr. Chairman, if I make one quick comment to the end? Would that be okay?
I'm sorry,
Would you mind if I make one quick comment to the representative?
please.
There's no uncertainty if you build in America and you produce your product in America, there will be no tariff.
We can't
So the
produce bananas
concept
in
of building
America.
in America and paying no tariff
We
is
cannot-
very, very clear.
We cannot
Fighting for
build
imports is
bananas in
not the same.
America. I've just heard 3 or 4 or 5 members from the other side of the aisle say thank you for bringing reform.
You're welcome.
No, but let me finish my sentence, please, because that's not what you're bringing. They obviously didn't hear your testimony. They did not read your testimony, and I'll read part of it. And you said it again today. I was sworn in at USAGM on March 3rd, and it became clear in the following weeks, today you said in days, that reform was not possible. They missed your premise. Reform's not possible. You figured that out in days. When asked what review you had done of this very large agency, you had no answer.
I do have an
Excuse
answer.
me, this is my time. You'll wait for my questions. You then went on to say, this is filled with a bloated staff who hates America. You have been holding up photographs after photographs, including the image of the President of the United States. I feel like I am suffering through a propaganda war through your testimony. So I can see why the other side of the aisle, which is now not here, was utterly confused and congratulating you for wanting to reform this agency. No, because here's what you said. And I'm a former professor of writing. I'm somebody who is really skeptical of euphemism. You've said over and over again, you just want to reduce it to its statutory minimum. And then you said, and that it will be gone by 2026. You want it gone. The president wants it gone by 2026. I ask unanimous consent to enter onto the record this article: Moscow and Beijing rejoice at the looming death of Radio Free Europe, VOA. I ask unanimous consent. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. No, that is not for you to speak to. That's what we do here. This article: Chinese propaganda surges as the U.S. defunds Radio Asia. I ask unanimous consent. Our adversaries are delighted with your plan, delighted that you'll be stripping this thing out. And I'm puzzled. My question really today is for Republican members. Think of the vaunted VOA. I have had the opportunity to visit VOA, and many of the journalists who have worked at VOA. It is something that this country has been very proud of. And yet, in your beginning testimony, you talked about, oh my goodness, USAGM, quote, hires a large number of foreign nationals, including from countries hostile to America, and uses J-1 visas as a shadow jobs and backdoor immigration program. Number one, again, propaganda, misinformation, J-1 visas are non-immigrant visas. Number two, and this is just a question of logic and basic understanding. Think about it. Many of the journalists who report through these supported networks are native to the countries in which it is critical to transmit accurate, factual, and legal, linguistically fluent information. Of course, they should be hired. But you use as though that's a bad thing. Large number of foreign nationals, as though there's some other, as though there's a reason to demonize them. Foreign national journalists who actually understand what's going on.
We should hire American.
You know what? Voice of America is not only about talking about America, it's about reporting on the world. And millions of people for decades have relied upon it. So for those of you who think this was about reform, it's not. It's about shutting down media. If you really wanted to reform it, if you really thought there were places to change, and I'm sure there are places to improve, then you would have spent more than a few days and come to a more serious conclusion. That's my worry about you in this position. You're just not serious about it. You are a propaganda machine for the Trump administration. It is an incompetent review that you have completed. Well, actually, you didn't complete it. It sounds like you never even started it. You didn't interview anybody. You've never run an agency like this. You're a former journalist, apparently, allegedly. Although I don't trust your journalistic integrity when you hold up a single picture of a newsroom at a single moment in time and think that reveals anything. It reveals nothing. It's evidence of nothing. I don't know if they all just went to lunch. Who knows what that's a picture of?
you ever
Your
worked in a
journalistic
newsroom?
integrity, I've been to many newsrooms. Your journalistic integrity is shot. My son has an expression that he taught me years ago, that trust and credibility is gained in drops and poured out in buckets. Sadly, you have poured out that trust and credibility over years, but I see why Mr. Trump put you in this position. He doesn't want a free press. He doesn't want Americans, soldiers across this globe hearing the facts of what's going on. He doesn't want our adversaries to actually know what's going on. Look at what we're up to today. We can't get the facts. We can't even get a briefing on an attack by the United States using our exquisite military expertise from the President of the United States and those who put it forward. We can't get at the facts. All we're getting is propaganda. Totally obliterated the nuclear program of Iran. We have to rely upon that as our news source. I'll be going to a SCIF to try to get whatever little information we can. But honest to goodness, I have no question for you because you don't have any credibility. You have misled this other side of the aisle with some notion of reform when you even say you don't want reform. You just want to collapse the doggone thing. You fired people. You let people go. You misled this committee, worrying about who was vetting the hires. You didn't bother to say that in 2018 to 2021, the new hires were vetted by DOD. You've misled this committee. You're misleading America. You did it in your own state through your own elections. You did it with the presidential election. You've lost your credibility. You've poured it out in buckets, and I yield the remainder of my time.
Any way I can respond to some of that?
I didn't.
I can? Okay, well, let's start. I agree that we have an exquisite military. I've never heard it referred to by that, and I think that you would have been fighting, and hopefully you were fighting, Representative, when our military were being summarily fired because they didn't want to get an experimental shot. So hopefully you were sitting in that chair, standing up for the men and women in our military, being fired from the military. And hopefully you are opposed to the CCP propaganda that has snuck in to the VOA. But I'm not sure if you are. And you talk about, you talk about me being upset that we're hiring foreign nationals.
Madam Chairwoman, I really am not asking for any response, so I would ask that this stop. I don't know whose time she is on.